What is up, everybody? Back. This is the first time in 2 weeks we've been on the air. As always, I'm Mike Lang here with the homie Webbs. Webbs was really good.
Hello. It is Sunday.
Tonight we're going to delve into kind of what we're going to talk about. We're just going to do it in a different manner, I guess. So Allen Iverson's hustle, and this is totally wrong. I just realized that we still have the practice one up here. It's not practice; it's the answer. So one of the questions that I think lots of teachers have webs is how is it that I can responsibly integrate AI into my classroom while still maintaining that students need to learn skills and be able to implement those skills in the ways that we traditionally assess those skills. And so Allen Iverson's nickname was the Answer, which is one of the most iconic nicknames in NBA basketball history, up there with like Akeem the Dream or Magic Johnson, those kind of things. And he was the answer because he figured out how to go and integrate his game into the larger scheme of things. And so we're going to really talk tonight about Ethan Mollick, who is a professor of the School of Business School of Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania, who's really kind of on the margins when it comes to AI and education, especially. We're going to kind of take Webbs and converse with her a little bit about um, the four principles, and we're just going to talk about principle one tonight. If you're not familiar, this book is a book that I recommend to every teacher, every person, I think, but every teacher especially. Co-Intelligence. It's by Ethan Mollick. It'll cost you like $15 or something like that on Jeff Bezos' platform. You can probably get it cheaper at Barnes and Nobles is making like a comeback, fam. Like they're
Is
like,
it?
dude, they back for blood. So Barnes and Nobles or wherever you get your books from. But Co-Intelligence, Living and Working with AI is Ethan Mollick's book. It was published last year. It is definitely worth a read. Pretty easy reading. And he has four principles that we're going to deal with for the next four shows. One principle per show. And today's principle is, I'm going to read it directly from the book Webs. Always invite AI to the table, which could be very controversial to lots of teachers.
I don't know. Is this one of those situations like Sammer? We need to redefine everything.
Or is it a situation in which, if you're always inviting AI to the table, one could argue, how do I ever assess what you know?
That's a good point.
And so we're gonna get into this tonight. It's gonna be interesting. And so we're just gonna have a conversation about some stuff. We'll see what Webbs thinks about some things. We'll converse about it. We'll have some laughs, hopefully, and we'll show you a tool that you should already be familiar with and utilizing inside of your instruction if you are an instructor. And so
I
Webbs,
have not read this book, by the way. I've purchased it. I have started it, but I have not finished it. I think I read the first paragraph of the first chapter, so
I
that's
mean,
as far
hey,
as I've gotten.
it's all good. It's all good. So, the principle one is always invite AI to the table, and Ethan Malik is a huge proponent of AI and AI in like every activity you can. We're going to take some very meaty quotes, meaty ideas from this section on the first principle. So the very first thing we're going to talk about this evening, Webs, is as we grow familiar with LLMs, and that's large language models, and you can explain what that is once we finish, we can not only harness their strengths more effectively, but also preemptively recognize potential threats to our jobs, equipping ourselves for a future that demands the seamless integration of human and artificial intelligence. Webs, first of all, what is a large language model?
A large language model is um, essentially like an algorithm that whose purpose is to be able to respond to human speech with human speech. Like it can summarize things, it can give examples, and it's based on a transformer, which is where what the T in Chat GPT means. So that's all technical stuff. It's not that important, but basically the idea is that another big caveat to it is that it is pre-trained or like generally trained. So typically in older models of machine learning, you would have to essentially give it the answers, right? You would give it a bunch of test data, give it the answers, and it would figure out, okay, this is the path I take to get to the right answer. And then it would learn how to get to the right answer, like repeat that. With models like large language models, you would just give it information and it looks for patterns within that information in order to like say, okay, I see this pattern, so I'm going to repeat it. I see this pattern, so I'm going to repeat it. There isn't really a right or wrong answer per se. It's just gathering patterns across like insanely large amounts of data. And in this case, it's focused on language, hence large language model.
Interesting. And in terms of this quote, like the things that really intrigue me about this particular quote from the text is he's essentially saying you want to start fooling with AI because you want to be able to head off any potential disruptions in your own employment and your own ability to make money. Do you agree with this particular statement from Ethan Mullock, or would you have say anything to push back on in terms of that, or do you see that as accurate?
I'd agree with it partially. I think that some ways that AI will change jobs and careers and how they're done will be inevitable, like Thanos. Um, However, what I do see is if you know the tool, then you can kind of see how and where it might disrupt your particular job, especially if you're using it frequently and being creative with it, such that you could at least get ahead of any potentially disruptive qualities or processes that it might bring to your job.
Interesting. You know, what I was really struck by with this was that last bit, equipping ourselves for a future that demands the seamless integration of human and artificial intelligence, almost like again again, I guess that's the reason why the book is called Intelligence, but this symbiotic relationship in a way that we currently do not have symbiosis with other technologies in that deep of a situation, right? We're not as while we utilize and we're dependent on on many technologies in our society, again, the depth to which he speaks here about artificial intelligence, it's almost as if like going forward, this is going to be so ingrained in our lives that if you do not have the ability to utilize this successfully, you're not going to be someone who's able to do lots of things.
I would argue we've been seeing this happen already, and that this is just a natural extension of what's already been going on in our society, right? Like, and this is very from the perspective of connectivism. So, connectivism is this idea that um, we have so much information that we deal with on a daily basis that there's no possible way for us to hold all of it in our memory. So, we've created ways to hold memory outside of ourselves. I think one of the big ways we do that is with our phone. Like, your phone holds access to your bank information. It holds your passwords if you're using a password manager. I could go on a whole thing about that, but we won't. That's a story for another day. A rant for another day. TED Talk for another day. But we have all these places outside of ourselves. Cloud storage, iCloud. How many people have thousands of pictures in iCloud? Just like we used to photo albums, right? So I think that this is a natural extension of what we've already seen happening over the last many decades. Is that there's so much information we can't possibly hold it all in our own brains. So we use these digital tools and companions in order to extend what we can manage when it comes to information.
So this essentially creating networks of proxies that allow us to access information on demand when necessary and process it. So yeah, definitely get that. Um,
And even pre-digital, like we were still doing that, right? Like you talk all the time about who is your crew? Who do you need to get together? The like how long have heist movies been around where you have to get the
yeah.
crew together and they all have different skills? Like this isn't really a new concept.
Well, notebooks, right? Just writing things down in
Yeah.
notebooks and having 75 million notebooks in your house with all the ideas that you had at one time and dating them and stuff, diaries, all that wonderful stuff are all ways to do that as well. So libraries, I know that I can go to the library and get a book about XYZ. Why would I write a book? Yeah, so I definitely feel what you're talking about. I think that makes a lot of sense. So that's, I mean, that's super interesting, and it got me thinking lots about, again, when you're in teacher Twitter or teacher Instagram or teacher Facebook or teacher TikTok or whatever, there's lots of, opinions about this particular thing. You have teachers who are embracing it as
What?
like
No.
going forward, right? Hey, this is something we need to do, and other people are like, no, they need to know how to tie their shoes and stuff like that and whatever. And so with that being said, the second quote from this particular concept, if I can get my mouse over, is privacy, right? This is one of the huge, big deals in not only teacher Twitter, but like all over the world in terms of how these things learn, right? So, one potential concern is the privacy of your data, which goes beyond the usual questions of sharing data with large companies into the deeper questions, concerns about training. Can you speak to a little bit about when he says the deeper concerns about training? What exactly is he talking about?
Sure. So it's kind of a like I think open secret at this point that all the big companies, Apple, Google, Microsoft, have essentially been scraping the open web, the internet at large, in order to train the AI models that they have. And what is that? What does train mean? Basically, like, here, go consume all of known available public knowledge. And like I mentioned before, large language model, the whole idea is I'm going to consume everything I can, like a sun in heat death. And I'm going to group and process and organize and figure out like what patterns I see across all of this information so that I can um, output answers to things. Like when you ask me a question about give me a recipe for a single bagel, right? It's gone through the internet, it's seen every bagel recipe out there, and it said, here are the ingredients, here are the proportions, here's the instructions in order to make one single serving bagel. It knows about what servings are, about how big a bagel is supposed to be, all of that, because it's consumed basically everything Food Network has to offer, everything Serious Eats has to offer, everything New York Times Cooking has to offer, even like Betty from Bell Dunk, Idaho, and her little cute blogging site. If it's publicly available, they have consumed it and figured out how to classify and group and reference information in order to produce that single bagel recipe. What I think Malik's quote is saying is that normally you would think about privacy from a company in terms of like, I give you this information, you store this information, will you keep that information safe? Instead, when it comes to training a large language model, it is straight up telling you we're going to ingest this information in order to use it to friggin' put in the blender and then spit out new answers. And so that can be very dangerous. Like some practical examples of that early on with ChatGPT, there were a couple of employees from Samsung, I believe it was, that had asked ChatGPT questions about proprietary information. And somewhere along the way, someone asked it a question that caused it to spit out that proprietary Samsung information.
Mm,
And they were like, somebody from Samsung clearly put information in here. Another example is people have been using it as like a therapy bot. So, but whatever information you put in, so like the example I saw, there's a creator I follow on TikTok. Her name's Alberta something. Alberta Tech, I think, is like her handle. And she mentioned like when you input things like, I think Terry from finance is having an affair, blah, 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 blah. um, what should I do about it? And then somebody somewhere says, hey, generate an example of a workplace drama. And then all of a sudden they're spitting out real information that you put into it as your therapy bot. So you have to think about like if it may be there is a possibility it gets remixed and nobody asks the right questions to get it to spit out. But
mm.
there have also been instances where they've been able to basically overload the memory and have it just spit out raw data. Like you just have, like, it is, you're putting in data that has the potential for anyone to bring it back out again.
And that's, and then when we're talking about school, right? We have a lot of teachers who are using these tools without the understanding of that particular process, and so you have there are products on the market right now that says they'll help you write IEPs, right? So you people are dumping kids' personal information into these products in order to spit these IEPs out. And now this kid's information is floating in the ether. So I think not only privacy from your personal perspective, but there might be people that have your information who are using your information to, you know, make their jobs easier in their mind, but complicate potentially your situation as well, which I think is a big concern for me as school systems are very slow to design any trainings around how they're going to deal with artificial intelligence, directives, or they do it very quietly. So I had to, somebody forwarded me. It was you actually that forwarded me the Nevada AI thing, if I'm not mistaken.
No, it wasn't me.
Okay, so someone forwarded me this thing. Never heard of it before, right? It was actually passed in March of this year, quietly.
Oh, wait, no, it was me.
Yeah. So
I thought
quietly,
you were talking about like an AI bot, but
no, no,
it
no,
was an
no.
article about like the stance on AI from the state of
Yeah,
Nevada, I
but
think.
they had created this is what the stance in Nevada is. And I'd never heard of it at all, and so I went and started asking people that I know are in schools, and no, I didn't know what this was thing. So lots of these things are being done in pockets. They're being done quietly. They're not being shared with other people, and I think the thing that's really concerning to me is these tools are in the wild. Teachers are curious about them, so they start to play with them, and they're playing with them, not knowing the things that you just discussed. Hey, if I happen to accidentally put this kid's name, address, and phone number in this thing, and this kid's the reason why this kid has IEP, that doesn't disappear, and that doesn't stay in my little neck of ChatGPT or Claude or whatever you're using. That is going to train the model in larger sense. And so, and Malik, in that same passage, and I want to use this entirely. Malik goes to say, how can you even trust the LLMs that say, "Oh, we're not going to use your answers to train," because you don't have anything to verify that's not actually happening. So that's also kind of
Hmm.
an interesting situation. Anything else to add?
I think you just have to assume that they are, like, regardless of what they say, assume that they are using your data to train their model. And that includes things like what you put into a Google Doc, what
Yeah,
you put into a Word doc. Because make no mistake, Microsoft and Google both have large language models that they are training.
absolutely. Which I think people that's one of the things that people don't really think about. And it's also interesting. What do you think as will more companies opt to have insulated versions of the LLMs just for their person? So think about like was it a Google Workplace or whatever? There, this is our workplace where our documents live or whatever. Would there be fundamentally a Gemini workplace, right, where this this LLM lives in our spot that learns our stuff but isn't shared with the wider?
That's a good question. So some that already exists to some extent in certain services. For example, allegedly, right? Like you said, there's really no way to prove it. Um, Amazon has one that you can upload your own information. It's called Amazon Q. You can upload your own information and it will train specifically on that. Um, I think Microsoft also allegedly will provide you with the uh, possibility of uploading your data in order to have a custom co-pilot bot. But again, I would say assume that it is training a wider model.
Oh,
I wouldn't.
I would agree with
Yeah, I would
that.
just assume it's training a wider model because it's highly likely, even if let's say that they're legit and they are not using it to train their larger model, it probably wouldn't be a huge lift to have an oopsie somewhere and suddenly all your data is fed into the larger model.
I agree. All right. Throughout history, the introduction of new technologies has often sparked fears that we would lose important abilities by outsourcing tasks to machines. When calculators emerged, many worried we would lose the ability to do math ourselves. Yet, rather than making us weaker, technology has tended to make us stronger. Do you agree or do you disagree?
I think there's some nuance to it. It is true that the evolution of technologies has eliminated certain the necessity for certain roles and jobs, right? That said, um, I think rather than trying to stop it from happening, it would be worth kind of like in his first quote, get to know the technology intimately so that you know where its weak points are. Keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. Like know it so well that you know what potential damage it could do for you and whatever your goals are. Um because like self checkouts or U scans as I call them, that has definitely eliminated some cashiers. One person can supervise 4 or 5 stations instead of one person per station. That's a common one that gets brought up when it comes to damage technology can do. But like we don't have people who drive horse and buggies anymore, right? Like we need fewer people to man stables because we don't have as many horses because they're not being used for transportation. Like there has always been an evolution to the workforce, and technology causes an evolution in how we do things day to day. I don't think that is a process that you can stop from happening, but
Mm.
I think if you're smart about it, you can get to know the direction things might break in order to get ahead of it.
Well, I think it goes back to your connectivism concept, right? So I remember high school having to go and buy the TI-84 with the TI-82 or whatever it was with the $100 or whatever, and everyone had to have the calculator because you were in algebra one and you were in chemistry and you needed to do all these formulas and stuff. And no one batted an eye. No one said you had to memorize all the formulas stuff. We would of course, you put your video games on your thing and you playing games and stuff, of course. But um, the calculator was also a check on for your own understanding, right? Hey, I temporarily forgot what 9 times 9 is. I have a device in my pocket that can check that. If instead of being wrong, I can make sure that I'm right because I my philosophy on education, I think from the time I returned back to the United States from Taiwan, was always every student should be successful. Period. Now, if every student should be successful, period, it's how do I ensure that before the kid writes the answer down, they have checks and balances, a process they go through to say, let me make sure that what I put on this paper or I built or whatever functions in the way that I would like it to do. If a tool allows you to do that and you artificially withhold the tool, that's not role modeling how adults do their job, which is fundamentally what we're supposed to be doing in K-12, right? I am supposed to role model to you how a Webbs does her job on a daily basis. Not let's look back to 1937 and say this is how people got out of the Great Depression. Therefore, you will learn it this particular way. And that's, I guess, where I get a little frustrated with. Is AI some kind of panacea that's going to solve the world? Absolutely not. That's not true. The same way that the calculator was not.
Or
However, is
spell
it
check or Google.
of the car or any of these other the general purpose technologies that they will create inequalities and inequities in our society like every other previously existing technology. However, to withhold access to those tools because the adult in the room perceives that the world is still the world that they grew up in, I think is a travesty. And again, to his point, inviting AI to the table does not mean that I have to do what AI says. I am still the pilot of the situation. And I think the way that he says this, it it puts the human firmly in control, inviting AI to the table. I am the person who is making the invitation for AI to come here, not the other way around. And I think we need to be able to articulate that in classrooms, which allows students to do what they need to do, but also use AI as a co-pilot. Go ahead, Webbs.
Oh, so funny enough, I had an assignment for school last week, and we had to pick statistician and write a short biography about that statistician. And at the head of the assignment, the professor put, if you choose to use AI, like just tell me how you're using it. And so I thought, oh, this is a good opportunity to do that. So I did a little bit of research on the person I chose. And then I went into two different AI tools and said, write me a song about this person. Here's the information about them. Um, and it, like, both of them spit out. Oh, hold on a second. I got to let my dog out.
No worries.
Will you go to just you?
Yeah, yeah.
But so I had it spit out the the lyrics to a song based on the information I gave it. I hated both of them. So I ended up just writing it on my own. Like there were some bits and pieces that I did like, and I used those, but ultimately, like I wasn't happy with what it gave me, and so I went a completely different direction. But it was enough of a spark to get me started that it made the whole process a lot more smooth. And like I had started from, let me do my own research, find my own information on a bunch of different websites, and then plug it into the tools that I chose.
Yeah, I mean, and think about that tearing off the path into those tools was a lot less time intensive than you sitting at your table beating your head in trying to come up with some stuff. And again, the thing that I really like about the thing I really like about the AI tools, especially because I work alone often, is this person or this entity that does not get tired of my questions. Right? Here's a question I have. I'm doing work, whatever. Cool. I don't know about this. Let me feed this to this thing and see what it says. Ah, da, 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 this is cool. This is unclear to me. This might be unclear. Cool. All right, bet. Because I can't bother you all the time. I can't bother my wife all the time. I can't bother my mom. Like humans have a level of tolerance that, when reached, is no longer makes them no longer a functional avenue for feedback. And so I think that is the most interesting thing about these particular tools as an educator is you what is one of the biggest things that the educators complain about? Time and the number of students they have in the classroom. So
Yeah.
you cannot functionally, and you can't do this and maintain your mental health by trying to fill everybody's cup in your classroom. There has to be some other strategy for you to have young people take the reins of their own uh, education, their own ability to converse with one another, and then also with the AI tools, and their own ability to present what they perceive to have found the solution to in your particular classroom. And so I think that's important to start to demonstrate, because I can see that as an invaluable tool going forward in their careers. Your boss is not going to care that you use Claude or Chat GPT to get the job. Your boss is going to care that you got the job accomplished. And there's at a certain level of quality with a certain level of speed. And this entire conversation really puts me back into James Paul G. And I think you and I had this conversation a week ago or so ago. But we don't judge humans by who they are. We judge them by what they can do with tools. And there's whether it's a hammer, it's a chisel, it's a spade in your garden, whatever, you are judged by what you do with tools. And so I think the same will be the case for AI tools. What say you, Webbs?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, very similarly, I was working through something, um, and I was struggling with um making sure that I understood what I thought I understood about this paper. And so I plugged the paper in to a GPT tool, like a chat tool, AI tool, whatever. And I was asking it questions to kind of confirm my own understanding, similar to what you were talking about, where like you can't always ask another person, right? Because I can't go to you and say, "Here, read this 14-page paper and let's converse about it." Like that's just not a reasonable ask of a human,
Mm-hmm.
but it allowed me to kind of do have this feedback loop so that I could check for understanding repeatedly, or say, "Hey, like word that in a different way," or like, "Here's my understanding. Do you agree?" And there's always that audit piece. There's always that piece of like, is what it's giving me accurate? Um, and Yeah, I think in that respect, it's really helpful. Like I had a colleague who used GPT to generate some questions about for an interview. Just like, hey, give me some questions for an interview for this role. And like some of them were good, some of them were like way off base. So there's always like this, like you have to audit, you have to participate in the conversation. It can't just be spit out, whatever.
Yeah, it's not magic, and I think that's what
Right.
a lot of people are. The misperception is that suddenly it just did the task for me. Uh, nah, and so
I
it's
mean, the
just
same way that you could Google a thing and copy paste it into your paper.
absolutely, absolutely. That is a apropos comparison. So this is the last quote that I pulled from this particular chapter before
Right.
we go into like playing around with it. But this one, it to me is the one that really kind of succinctly buttons up this particular principle. The key is to keep humans firmly in the loop, to use AI as an assistive tool, not as a crutch, which is kind of what you were kind of speaking about just a moment ago. Can you go a little bit? You got anything else to add to that?
Yeah, like one of the things that I've been toying around with for a little while now is the idea that when people have the same questions over and over again, it's helpful to have a GPT tool that can answer those questions. Especially if it's a very direct, like DOK1 if you will type question. Like
Mm-hmm.
the answer is always the same. It's not a dynamic answer. Because that's going to save you just such a tremendous amount of time and effort. Like one of the things that I used to do was if I knew I was answering the same question, and I saw this a while back. If someone asks you a question, write a blog post about it because if one person's going to ask that question, you're probably going to get many other people asking that question. And if you write it out once, you'll be able to just send people the link to the blog post, right? So that's kind of like the first step. And then if it's an answer that I have to give out a lot, I'll make it a text expander like bit so that I can just type a few keys and it'll spit out the answer to the question. And then beyond that, like I'll bring in like Power Automate and have it respond when someone asks the question. And then beyond that, you can build like a Copilot or a GPT, a custom GPT that person can interact with and get answers to their questions. So like that very simple, basically an FAQ, like how do you address the problem of frequently asked questions at each of those levels so that you're giving yourself more time back while still meeting the needs of the people who need the answers from you.
I always think voicemail, right?
You lost me.
So I don't want to pick my phone up, or my phone is silent, or whatever, right? There's ability for a third party to say, leave a message, you send the message, I can listen to it. When I listen to it, now voicemail's got its visual voicemail. I don't have to listen to the message, I can just read what you said. But the convenience of voicemail is that fundamentally you never miss a call that you actually wanted to get. People can leave you a phone a message, right? And you can choose to call them back if you choose to, or if you don't. You can text them back, you can email them, you can do any number of things. And it's just the convenience of having that particular thing. I saw a hilarious Instagram reel. This guy has the Korean Siri, and
Mm.
he didn't know that the voicemail is also in Korean, and the guy is
Oh,
like speaking broken English in Korean. It's like very difficult to hear and stuff. Like it was hilarious. If I find it, I'll send it to you. But it was like really funny. So I have Australian Siri, and Australian Siri and I have conversations all the time in the car and stuff like that and whatnot. Whatever. And it's just such a. It's like voicemail assistant next level, and now the GPTs are this next level of, as long as you realize you're not conversing with a person, to me you're totally fine having conversation, doing what you need to do. And we'll kind of talk about this in a couple shows. The thing is just making sure that you're not anthropomorphizing these entities to such an extent that you get lost in the world of the GPT, I guess. I think that some people, um, I think it's an inevitability, unfortunately, that that's going to happen often, but it is what it is. Um,
The whole ethics conversation.
and like how many people are going to get defrauded because of these things, how many people getting catfished and all kind of stuff.
But I think
So
that goes back to understanding the technology. And unfortunately, for a long time now, I feel like it's been acceptable to say I'm just not a technology person,
this is
to
true.
think that it's like mystical and it's some kind of magic, and it's really not. And one of the best ways that you can protect yourself against scams like that, against um, you know, bad actors, is understanding how it works so that you recognize when shady things are afoot.
I would agree. I would agree. So we kind of looked at the whole first principle. All right, and again, the first principle, I'm going to throw that back on the screen really quickly. That first principle is always invite AI to the table. And working with teachers on a regular basis, this is not something that lots of educators are comfortable with or desirous of.
I feel like we need to find somebody who does not agree with that and have a whole conversation.
Uh, I, it would not be difficult.
Because it's definitely set up in a very like rage baity way.
Oh, absolutely. I think all four of the principles are kind of in the same kind of like I'm gonna like until you unpack them. And this is why I
Yeah.
think bringing the quotes out, where he is essentially saying, don't use it as a crutch. It shouldn't be the magic answer machine. You do have some responsibility to ensure that, yo, what you're saying is accurate, it works, da 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 da. And so we're going to demonstrate exactly what we're talking about. And we're going to use AI tools to do it because, like, why not? Because, again,
It's kind of the point of this whole conversation.
that's the point. And also, like, it's the point of how do we make sure that students um, are prepared, right? And so we met Andy Search the last time we were together. I love this tool. Great. So Andy Search doesn't cost anything. Privacy wise, no information is being. I'm not putting any personal information in. Your students are not going to have to log in or anything like that. We have to worry about, you do want to have a regular internet safety conversation with students before they touch any devices in your classroom. What we don't do, we do not type personally identifying information in the websites. We don't talk about where our address is. We don't talk the name of our dogs. Lots of stuff, but that is a beyond AI conversation. That is a conversation you should be having with your young people, regardless of what tools you're using or you're not using. So, Webs, we talked about pyroclastic flow last time. Let's stay in that kind of mentality because I think pyroclastic flow is cool. So,
Okay, I just want to let you know that because of our whole conversation about pyroclastic flow, I then had a frequency illusion for the following week where I saw pyroclastic flow, that phrase, more times in that week, which was like three, but it's weird that it happened thrice. Uh, it was bizarre. I did do some googling of pyroclastic flow, so perhaps the trackers were following that.
perhaps, yeah, perhaps. So cool. We've got this situation here. Let's create a podcast that talks about pyroclastic flow. So a podcast conversation is a say this is a situation where in class you're studying about volcanoes, and we want our students to be able to present that situation as as succinctly and as in the most entertaining manner possible. Now, usually when I start talking about podcasting with teachers, it's like I've never done a podcast before. So we have this like hard stop of I don't have that particular skill, therefore my students can't do the podcasting, which is why the AI tools are such an important part of this particular situation. Also, just for kicks and giggles,
I also want to put out there that a podcast is just two dudes talking, two people
Or
talking.
it could be
That's
one
really all it
person.
is.
It could be one person
One
talking.
person
Like,
talking, exactly.
so if you
Also,
look,
I'm laughing because anytime we do one of these little projects, they always bring me such joy.
I mean, it's just very interesting stuff, man. It's fun. So
Well, because yeah, it's fun. Like it is what you make it if you don't take yourself too seriously.
if you're someone who's like interested in doing podcasts in the school year, the Student Podcast Challenge from NPR, they do it every year. There's tons of stuff. Um, it's more for middle and high school students, but a lot of the tools and a lot of the strategies can be adapted for younger learners, and it's just fun stuff to deal with. And so um, the fifth graders I was working with at the time got super hyped. They all did them, but they could not turn them in because it was 6 through 12. And so we just had our own podcasting listening day at school, and everybody listened to each other's podcasts and it was cool and stuff. I still am a little perturbed that they don't allow upper elementary school students to be in the podcast challenge, but it is what it is.
That's a great adaptation, though.
I mean, you want people to present their work because, like, it's
Yeah.
the thing that sucks the most is it's like going through a whole process and no one sees it. Like that really bites, in my opinion. All
Yeah.
right. So let's deal with the Power Classic Flow. So we're gonna use AI tools, and we're gonna imagine that we're writing information down in our notebooks just because we don't have the time to actually do that particular part. So we're gonna go to the podcasting or the AI tool. Up, pretty up. So explain the importance of pyroclastic flow to me as if I was a kindergarten. I love starting at kindergarten just because you're probably going to get the simplest version of the definition. If you need something to be like a little bit more complex, make it more complex. I always lean into the whole Albert Einstein. If you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you probably don't understand it. If you give it to me in 6-year-old language, most of the learners in fourth or fifth grade are going to get it, and we should be good to go. And I always think fourth or fifth grade, third grade, and that upper elementary school kind of places where I want my vocabulary to be. And so we got library.fiveable.me. I have never heard of this particular website. Have you ever heard of this website, Webs?
I have not.
Seems a little sketch to me. I'm not going to deal with that. All right, great. And one of the things I like
Also,
about Andy,
it looks very advertising.
yes, it's something sketchy about it, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have the ability to have that read, that summarize, and that the explain. So I'm going to leave that one alone. Looks like it's trying to sell me something. So I'm going to scroll up. NationalGeographic.org. We're generally going to believe the National Geographic.org and Kids National Geo or whatever. So I've got that. So I can always visit it. I can read it. Here's the entire deal inside of Andy. Here's the summarize. Great. If I don't believe that summary, what can I do, Webs?
I can look for other. I can go to source material, and then I can read widely and see if other sources corroborate what I read in the source material for that piece.
Absolutely. So let's go in this
Which we
dude.
talked about that last week, but I think it's worth reiterating. If you are looking for a tool to use, a Gen AI tool, one that will provide you with the resources, like, hey, this is where I got this answer from, is like a requirement, in my opinion, so that you can see where it's pulling its information from.
So I'm going to say, I'm going to visit this. I'm going to copy that. And if you're not somebody who uses, you're not a Padlet person, or let's not use the sandbox. The sandbox is going to be a little bit more. Let's just use a blank board. I love Padlets. Padlets are the greatest of all time.
They've added so much to it.
Oh, my dude, it's the best. All right, so cool. I'm going to take that and say Nat Geo and publish. So I've got that thing there as one of my ideas. Great. I'm not going to name this Padlet at all, but it exists. Great. I'm going to take that summarize and I'm going to copy that information. Hazards of pyroclastic flow. I like that as well. I didn't know they were hazardous. I did know that, but I'm pretending I didn't know that. And we're gonna like generally when I work with students, I don't use the Padlet as the first thing. It's a tree map. It's a circle map. And something where they're actually taking a notebook piece, a notebook paper, or sticky notes or something, and really rocking and rolling that way. So I am not against analog anything. I think analog is cool as long as I end up being able to produce something that I can share widely. I think is important. What say you, Webbs?
Yeah, I think another benefit to putting it someplace you can share widely is it can also be searchable. Like for me, that is an important feature when I'm doing research is I have to be able to search it for the things that I'm looking for because if you start to get really large bodies of research, then reading through it one thing at a time, it just doesn't scale.
Okay, so cool. Again, we're going here first, but about we have checked the information. It comes from reputable sources. We would have, in theory, I love tree maps. I think tree maps are the dopest thing. When I was doing writers workshop, everything started from a tree map. We built our paragraphs horizontally, then we built them vertically. Kids lined their stuff up. We were all good. So we're going to take these two pieces of information that we have here. We're just going to use them as the basis of our podcast. And the tool that every teacher, no matter what grade level you're dealing with, if you're looking for a GPT tool, general purpose technology tool, it is Perplexity because Perplexity again does not require a login for me to be able to utilize its functionality.
Do you know
Prior
why
to
it's called perplexity?
why is it called Perplexity?
Perplexity is a feature of human speech.
Oh,
So, it's one of the things that allegedly the GPT like trackers, one of the features that they use in order to try and determine if something is generated by GPT or human.
uh,
Because perplexity, if I recall correctly, is like how kind of weird your sentence might be. Like, do the concepts go together? So if I say something like, I'm going to get coffee tomorrow, that all those ideas fit together. They are rational, they form a sentence. But if I say something like, coffee is ducks on a Tuesday, bow wow, woof woof, like that has a high level of perplexity because it basically doesn't make sense.
interesting.
Yeah.
And so I'm simply going to take you through, and what Malik says in his book is really, really cool. There are no real rules to this stuff. There are people who created rules. Hey, this is how you should prompt, and this is the best way to get the prompts, and da 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 da. And I spend hours, too many hours on the internet, like looking at people. This is how they prompt, and this is what the results were, or this is in Mid Journey you do this or whatever. But I am always someone who wants a structure first because even if the content of the thing that I collaborate with the GPT tool is garbage, I've got a structure that I can take myself and say, okay, I can just plug in my own ideas into this particular structure and be successful, rather than having when Webbs you were talking about the songs, having the thing come up with the songs. Great. I don't really want the song first. I want what structure might I use in order to create the architecture for a song. And then later on in our conversation, I want you to give me an example of using this architecture to solve this particular problem. So I see this demonstration of what it is, because that's usually all I need to kind of spark my own mind and say, all right, bet, I know exactly what I'm going to do. And so it's just ask me anything we want to create a podcast in which we have some people talking about pyroclastic flow. So we're going to say, let's structure a podcast about pyroclastic flow.
It's a solid pro tip, by the way.
Who is going to be our audience for this, Webbs? Who do we want to speak to about
Um,
this?
I think our audience should be senior citizens in a retirement home.
The audience for this podcast should be senior citizens and retirement homes. In any particular place? Are we talking about English speakers? Are we talking about individuals that have a certain proclivity?
I think, well, yeah, English speakers. I don't think either of us have Spanish good enough to be able to do this in Spanish
Or
or
English
check it in
speakers
Spanish.
and are interested in what?
Geothermal activity.
And let's say exploring volcanoes uh, during a vacation. Let's just say that they're volcanoes enthusiasts. Create a structure which includes an introduction, at least three say at least three transitions through a conversation
This is gonna be amazing.
conclusion that is inspired by Wild America, hosted by Marty Stauffer. So let's see what it comes.
Volcano Ventures.
So, great. Here's my podcast, Exploring Podcast Explore for Senior Citizens. Introduction, open statement. Welcome to Volcano Ventures, where we take you on an exciting journey to explore the wonders of volcanoes and fascinating phenomena. Today, we will delve into the podcast that flows on the nature's okay, cool. Purpose, interest, and engagement. Share stories, insights from network. Okay, cool. All right, cool. Excellent. Storytelling segment. Interesting. Now, did it do all the work for me?
You gave it the outlines, yeah. You gave it the general the format, the important elements, and we haven't even given it any data yet.
So I did not. I got a structure. So even if I just want to take this because I have all the other work on my tree map and say, okay, cool. I just need to organize the information that I researched on my tree map into these particular places. I'm good to go. But our collaboration can end right now. However, the thing I really like about Perplexity in general is these questions at the bottom, right? How can we make the podcast engaging for senior citizens? Is one of the questions. That's really interesting. Let's ask that question.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the title. I feel like it's lackluster.
The title, I became very interested in the word pirate, or the concept of pyroclastic flow, because of Ice Cube. So I would want O'Shea Jackson integrated into the title of this podcast in some kind of way, like O'Shea Jackson and what's the thing, the Lightning Thief. So O'Shea Jackson and the Volcano Thief, or something like that, that kind of like really, like partnered those things. So let's say the rapper Ice Cube is famous for integrating pyroclastic into his rhymes. Considering this, offer suggestions.
O'Shea Jackson and the Virtuous Volcano.
Offer suggestions for a title.
And then make it a play on Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief.
Which
by Rick
is a play
what's his name?
On what's it Percy Jackson?
Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief.
Lightning.
By Rick Riordan.
Rick Riordan.
Riordan.
Which
sometimes it's also fun to just try and break it.
Ice Cube's
We should try the strawberry test with Perplexity.
Real name O'Shea Jackson. Ah, why'd you do that? Oh, don't leave. Oh, cool.
Okay.
OJ Jackson, the Pyroclastic Flow. O'Shea Jackson, the Flow Thief. O'Shea Jackson, and the Eruption of Rhymes. O'Shea Jackson, the
Ooh.
Volcanic Verses. O'Shea Jackson, the Ashen Adventure. Those are actually
Ooh.
pretty good.
The last three I'm a big fan of.
I like the Ashen Adventure just because I think that kind of like it's very visual.
Yeah.
All right, so again, these
I
are
feel like he needs an album called The Volcanic Verses.
but lots of the things as a human that you wouldn't consider, you get sparked utilizing the AI tool. It's also helpful that again another human is here as well to kind of be able to bounce ideas off. But there's going to be times in which you do not have other humans,
Yeah.
and so having this thing as a again, I could just take this part here, and if I already had my research done, here's my podcast. I'm just plugging my information into those different transitions, and I'm good to go.
I would say too, if you are wanting to dabble in AI and you're nervous about it, go back and rewatch this episode and just follow along and do the same thing. Go to Perplexity, do the same steps we did, and you can get a feel for what it looks like and what it feels like. And then throw your own twist on things and ask it different questions and maybe try to do a different problem or do a different topic like instead of because now we could also add in there like here's everything I know about pyroclastic flow, integrate this information into or maybe I want to do it myself because sometimes it's a lot easier like if you have a clear vision for what you want to do, sometimes it's a lot more straightforward to just do it yourself than go through the iterations of back and forth with the AI tool. I think this is an important difference too, is you can tell an AI assistant or tool, I like this thing, I don't like this thing, I want to see more of this thing. And it'll iterate and give you, okay, let me lean more in this direction, less of this, and also add these new elements that you're suggesting. I think that's an important skill. Similar to like when people were first learning how to do Google searches and you had to have sort of a some rules of thumb, some heuristics for um, knowing uh, when websites were trustworthy or not. I think this is one of those other skills that I've noticed. Like nobody teaches this anywhere, but it's an important kind of like little pro tip for prompt engineering is, and this is prompt engineering, by the way. So if you see that anywhere, that's all this is just coming up with things to tell your AI bot to make it do what you want. It's just a fancy term for it. Um, that's one of the things you can do is give me more of this, less of this. Here's some new information.
And so the other thing is giving it a persona and a perspective to think from is always really fun. And so the question or the prompt I gave it, I like this structure, so keep it the same way that it is. This podcast is hosted by a nascent rapper who interviews scientists about what they do. What are sample questions that could be asked during every transition in this podcast to a volcanologist? So great. Now I've got my questions. This is making it a lot easier for me to be able to do what I need to do. Here are questions. I like this question. I don't like this question. I like this question. Give me another question that's in this similar vein. I want you to integrate lyrics from Ice Cube's last album into the question so that it really to have to do that by yourself would take a lot of time. Being able to have a lot of that work done in an in an automated way for you helps you out in the long run. Go ahead, Webbs.
I think also this is a scaffolding tool. So one of the things that I think can get really discouraging with learners who struggle is not being able to match their ideas they have in their head with the skills and abilities that they currently have, right? Whether it comes to writing or reading, especially with our younger learners, like who are either just getting to that or who are just at the end of the learning to read phase or who are just starting their reading to learn phase. Um, Often they have big ideas, but they can't execute on them because they're limited by what they can read and what they can write. And they use up so much of their cognitive energy trying to read and write versus being able to um, focus on their ideas. Like, yeah, absolutely, they need to practice reading and writing, and also being able to kind of give that a boost so that they can still get the joy of producing and meeting their expectations of the ideas they have in their head without being held back by what their current reading and writing abilities are.
And the other thing that makes Perplexity the tool that I would use with young people is great. I'm going to give you a direct assignment about what you need to be able to produce uh, in collaboration with the GPT tool. What you're going to do is you're going to share, and we're going to come here to our situation. I said volcano song, but anyway, let's edit that. So let's say this is going to be your volcano. Let's just say your podcast structure. And what I want to make sure that you're doing or not doing is save that. Is that you've done the assignment, but you also have shared that particular structure. So great, I could have put whatever I wanted inside there. I'm going to paste that link inside there. I could use the link there. It's going to be an external link. My podcast structure. Because there might be other people that say, hey, I really like your podcast structure. I don't like mine. Let me just take yours and rock and roll with it. There's the thing. If you use discussions, you could keep discussing all the way through. Everyone puts their information inside there and you're good to go. It with this particular tool, it allows for accountability to still be on the table. You still are required to do the thing that you said you did without having to give up any privacy. So again, a kid is not logging into this tool at all. We still have a record of what you did, and we're good to go. And I really think Perplexity, in a way that no one else is doing currently, not having to log in and still being able to share the output of the conversations. That's the reason why, every time I work with a teacher and they're looking for a tool that essentially does the search engine part as well as the idea generation part. This is the reason why I use this particular tool. Anything to add, Webs?
No, I think those are all really great points.
So hopefully you're not afraid of the tech. And again, the thing is, get your fingers dirty. Like go in, start playing with stuff, um, do things that are interesting, do things that are wrong, give it weird personas. How would a clown answer an algebra one question? Design a car that floats on bananas. Whatever it is, just kind of really play with it, and also have a situation in which your young people are going to have to live in a world in which this is the way that they are communicating with the tools they're going to use. It is to me unfair to say we're going to protect you from the future because I have questions, I guess. Well, like how would you articulate that?
Um, that's a good question. I don't want to minimize that people have concerns. Like, absolutely, there are things to consider when it comes to using AI tools. And I think people are smart to educate themselves on how they work, on what are the potential privacy issues, what are the security issues, what do you have to consider based on the level of your learners or your students. And at the same time, I sorry, my dogs have an opinion about that apparently. And at the same time, I think it is a naive perspective to think that it's not you can eliminate it from your classroom entirely because it's in Google, it's in Microsoft, it's in every company that can put AI into their product is putting AI into their product. So there is no escaping it. Like that's just not feasible. I think the smarter play is understand it, understand how to give guidance around using it, um, give guidance around using it, understand how it impacts your job as an educator, understand the benefits and the limitations, understand that things like GPT zero and other AI detectors, for all intents and purposes, they don't really work that well. Not to a place where you can be confident that you're not failing students who don't deserve it, um, and putting their educational careers at risk. So I think that the concerns are valid, and also I think there's unfortunately like you can't eliminate it entirely. That's just not feasible. So you have to educate yourself around how it works, what its limitations are, and figure out what it looks like to integrate it into your classroom.
Yeah, and to think about the fact that you do not need to, everything does not have to be AI, right? Again, I said,
Yeah.
if I was doing this with some young people, it'd be tree maps first. We talk about some things, and then we would take it to the tools. But that's always how I worked anyway. The book, Co-Intelligence, Ethan Malik, he is not someone who is a sponsor of the Intelligent Hoodlums, but he should be. But this book is a great read. It's one that'll kind of get you thinking. And also the questions that Webbs was kind of alluding to, it will ask you to deal with those questions in a very real sense. And again, tonight we looked at two tools, Perplexity and Andy. Neither one requires a login for your young people. There are no like histories of what they search for, or anything like that. Outside I'm assuming they're tracking IP addresses because everybody tracks IP addresses. But beyond that, like your kids can use those things free of the watchful eye of big tech, I guess, in that particular sense. We'll be back in 2 weeks. We're going to look at Principle 2 in Malik's book, and then also we have an event October the 19th.
It's either really far away or we're time traveling,
Yeah,
man.
dude. Yeah, it is what it is.
October.
October the 19th at the Northeast Korean Technical Academy. We're going to be doing a simulation of sorts that is going to help you with AI integration. That's going to help you with looking at digital tools in a different way, collaborative strategies, as well as the Nevada Portrait of a Learner. It is free. You just need to go to the website, head to our Facebook page, our Instagram page, any Hoodlums place, and you will see a link to go and register for that. And we hope to see you there.
You can
All
always
right.
just Google the intelligent hoodlums and education, and I think we're like the top result nowadays.
Works. I had to bring that back. All right.
Yes.
We are out. We'll see you in 2 weeks. God bless America.